Happy Monday and welcome to Yahoo Sports Daily. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. Happy December. We hope everybody had an amazing holiday and that you got to enjoy some time, however you choose to celebrate Thanksgiving over the course of a great weekend. But we are excited. That was our first day off from this show since we launched back in August. We're excited to get at you today. A lot of news to react to, a lot of NFL action we want to get in. But Caroline, we start with the biggest story of the day, and that is Lane Kiffin. You called it. You called it weeks ago. You called it on this show all the way back in October that he would be the head coach of LSU. How are we feeling today?
Yeah, I didn't realize that it would cause all these repercussions and all this drama and all this chaos amongst the Ole Miss athletic department on social media. But I guess that's just kind of what you get when you're dealing with Lane Kiffin, is a whole lot of chaos and a whole lot of drama. As an LSU fan, I'm thrilled. LSU got their guy. It was identified very early on in this coaching search by Florida, by Auburn, by LSU, by Penn State that Lane Kiffin was the best coaching candidate on the market in a coaching carousel that is as busy as we've seen it in a very long time in college football. And let's not forget, it was not that long ago that this LSU coaching search looked like it was going to be an absolute disaster, with the inflammatory comments that the Louisiana governor was making, the mess that the Louisiana local government was making of this coaching search. And then Brian Kelly and LSU were going into a legal battle about, was he fired for cause? Was he not? Does he earn his entire $54 million buyout? That LSU, when they fired Brian Kelly, was, I think, the best coaching vacancy in the country. And it quickly turned into an absolute dumpster fire because of all of the hands that were getting in on this coaching search. Now here we are, and LSU made it out with their number one option. LSU made it out with the hottest coaching candidate in the carousel over the last several years. Let's not forget, Auburn was heavily pursuing Lane Kiffin just last year. So Lane Kiffin is easily the best coaching candidate that was out there. You know, Dan Lanning wasn't for hire. Obviously, Kirby Smart is not for hire. Marcus Freeman was not for hire. So of all of the coaches that have not made it to a national championship game or haven't won a national championship, Lane Kiffin was the best. So for me as an LSU fan, I'm thrilled. If Lane Kiffin can win 11 games at Ole Miss, he can do it at LSU with the amount of talent that is in the state of Louisiana, with the amount of resources that's in the state of Louisiana, the brand prowess that LSU brings. I'm not trying to be a homer, but the brand of LSU, the money that is available to LSU is more than that at Ole Miss. So if you can do that at Ole Miss, then why not win a national championship at LSU? And now we can talk about my alma mater, my team, being legitimately in the national championship conversation and having those expectations. So for that, I'm thrilled. They got their guy. And I think today, now that Lane Kiffin is the head coach of LSU, LSU football is in a better place. But there's also another, thank you. There's also another side of that. I do have a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth about how Lane Kiffin handled all of this. And it's not all on Lane Kiffin, right? The coaching calendar is totally messed up. That I think Ole Miss could have handled this a little bit better as well. There's clearly a lot of bad blood between Lane Kiffin and Keith Carter, the athletic director at Ole Miss. So it's not all on Lane Kiffin, but he was, he went on the Pat McAfee show. He was heavily involved on Twitter. A lot of things that he was saying, he was very 1 foot in, 1 foot out at Ole Miss. That puts a bad taste in my mouth about the way that Lane Kiffin conducts his personal and professional business. His ex-wife Layla and his kids taking tours around Gainesville and Baton Rouge. That doesn't sit well with me. The fact that Lane Kiffin's extracurriculars always seem to get into coaching and always seems to be in the headlines. Like, I don't want any of that. Come in and win football games and be quiet when you do it. I don't think that's what you're going to get from Lane Kiffin. So I'm kind of feeling two ways about it. LSU landed their guy. LSU landed their whale. But also I understand the baggage that comes with that.
So I'm going to be the one person maybe in the country right now that doesn't have a problem with the way Lane Kiffin has handled this, because the system's broken. And we've seen coaches talk about this and say it's not Lane's fault. I think that there's an extra layer to this. I'm not a fan of complaining about things without a suggestion for resolution. In general, in life, if you're going to come in and you're going to absolutely wildly bitch and moan about something, then you have to give me what the solution is going to be. The college football calendar is what it is. It is what it is because coaches wanted it to be that way because they wanted a system where kids could get into school in spring, which would give them advanced time to get ready for summer. That's the reason it exists, why it exists. So coaches decided, programs decided, schools decided years ago that the appropriate calendar was to have National Signing Day in 2 days. It's coming up. And then to have the transfer portal open in the middle of the college football playoff. Those dates were set because of the school calendars, the academic requirements to get somebody in school, and what it looks like to get somebody in time for the spring semester. So if you do not like the timing of this, my question is, how would you fix it? You can't make every school across the country change their academic calendar, so cancel that off your list. That means you're never going to have a realistic way for coaches to coach their way through the playoffs while also building with a competitor. I understand that you can look at coaches that are jumping maybe from group of 5 to power 4, and you can say, well, they do it. Well, this is far different. As Scott Van Pelt said on SportsCenter, this is like going into your wife and saying, hey, I want a divorce. By the way, I'm going to be marrying your biggest rival, but I want to stay in the house through Christmas to make sure that the kids aren't impacted. Like, life doesn't work that way. So unfortunately, because of the calendar, there was never going to be a way for these two sides to part ways that people weren't going to complain about it. I don't love Lane Kiffin standing up and not taking real accountability. I feel like he wants to be liked. That's why even on the tarmac, he says, well, I talked to my mentors. It's like he's looking for anybody else to blame for the fact that he's made this decision. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure how he could have made this decision and not pissed everybody off. So if you're LSU, if you're Lane Kiffin, you really can't worry about that. You can't honestly worry about the ancillary damage that this causes. You just got to look at it and say, I'm taking this opportunity, which means I'm leaving, which means I'm going to start building LSU today. There was never going to be a realistic way for him to coach through Ole Miss and become the head coach at LSU. That never existed. So anybody that told you it did is worried too much about rubbing a genie and having an answer in their prayers. Like, that's not the way the real world works. So now we just got a very real world example of Lane doing what's best for Lane, LSU doing what's best for LSU, Ole Miss doing what's best for Ole Miss, and everybody that gets screwed in the process is just collateral damage.
I don't blame LSU for any of this. And look, I will blame LSU when LSU is to blame. I can guarantee you that. But LSU pursued who they thought was the best coach in the market. LSU went about their business, and Verge Osberry, the new athletic director at LSU, came out and said, we told Lane Kiffin, if you want to coach in the college football playoff, we will let you coach. And that is understanding that they would miss out on the early signing period, which I believe is tomorrow. That meant that they would more than likely miss out on the early transfer portal window. So LSU was willing to roll the dice and was willing to risk missing out on this early window to get their guy. Like, LSU, I think, went about it the right way. LSU said, hey, you take care of your business, but we're going to take care of ours. And we're okay with missing out on Lane Kiffin if it means, not putting pressure, an insurmountable amount of pressure on this decision that Lane Kiffin has said over and over and over again was a really difficult one. And I believe that it was a really difficult one. So I don't blame LSU for any of this. They wanted to get their coach. They gave him a very healthy offer to do so, and they did their business. I do blame
Caroline.
Lane
That's
Kiffin,
where I don't disagree with you. I don't blame LSU. I also don't blame Ole Miss for sitting there and saying, hey, we're not going to let you stay in front of this team and poach everybody every day. We're not going to let you recruit for one school while you're working for another. We're not going to let you have your cake and eat it too. So I don't blame LSU. I don't blame Ole Miss. And because of that, I don't really blame Lane.
I blame Ole Miss for not having a better backup plan. That we all kind of saw the writing on the wall with this. And I did think that there was a very, a high possibility that Lane Kiffin would stay at Ole Miss. But if you are the athletic director at Ole Miss, you're seeing all of these rumblings. You're seeing, the news. You're seeing the fact that Lane Kiffin's ex-wife is taking tours around other SEC campuses. It happened last year when Lane was very publicly flirting with Auburn. They never came up with a backup plan. Now, Pete Golding, the defensive coordinator, has been promoted to not just interim coach, but permanent head coach. And I think that's a good move. Everything that I've heard is that the players absolutely love Pete Golding. But there's also a reason why you haven't heard Pete Golding's name come up in any of these head coaching vacancies. Not for Arkansas, not for Auburn, not for Florida, not for Penn State, not for UCLA. None of these openings. It's because there's a big question mark on if Pete Golding can take that leap from DC to HC, which is what he's going to be doing now. You mean to tell me that this was Ole Miss's best option, that they didn't have a legitimate backup plan in place just in case Lane Kiffin would have left? So I blame Ole Miss for that, but I don't. I don't blame Ole Miss for not letting Lane Kiffin coach in the playoffs because it's LSU. It's not like it's any other team in the country. It's not like Tulane letting John Sumrall coach throughout the playoffs for Tulane before he leaves for Florida. Ole Miss and LSU are bitter rivals who are going to be playing every single year for the foreseeable future. I don't blame Ole Miss for that.
I don't blame Ole Miss for not having a better backup plan because I'm not sure realistically, like again, I'm just stacking logic here. Let's say that you're Ole Miss and you're willing to throw $20 million a year at Marcus Freeman, whatever. I'm just making up imaginary names. Well, how are you doing that when you don't know if you're going to need him or not? There's no notable coach. There's no prime opportunity coach. There's no A-list coach that you're going to go after and say, hey, now, if Lane stays, we don't want you. But if he goes, we'd love to make you our guy. Like, that doesn't really exist. That's just not a way that you can court somebody, which is why I keep saying, like, sometimes life just sucks. Like, I honestly don't think Ole Miss could have done much else to handle this better. I think they kind of made chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what, given the opportunities that they had. Because if they wanted one of these landmark names, if they wanted to get in on the Summerall sweepstakes, well, how are you going to his agent and saying, okay, we only want you if Lane chooses to leave, which means, hey, don't flirt with these other places yet because we're waiting on Lane. So we need you to wait on us while we wait on Lane. Like, that's not a real way for anybody to truly make a backup plan. And I also don't think Lane could have made this decision faster. Like, it's a tough choice on what you do. That's why I continue to say I think everybody was just sort of stuck, and I don't know what they could have done to handle that better.
I also think that's kind of part of your job is to at least put the framework in place to not be totally and completely screwed over. Because now Ole Miss is entering the playoff. Who's calling plays for Ole Miss? Because the offensive coordinator and co-offensive coordinator were both in Baton Rouge last night. We're on the plane to Baton Rouge and are going to be joining Lane Kiffin's staff at LSU. The wide receivers coach will be joining Lane Kiffin's staff at LSU. Now, majority of the defensive staff is retained because Pete Golding, the DC, is going to be taking over as head coach. So I believe everything that I've seen is that basically the entire defensive coaching staff is staying in Oxford. Who's calling offensive plays? Like, who is doing that for Ole Miss, going into the next couple of weeks? Like, I do hate that that's now where Ole Miss is left, that the best season in program history and school history, you are now playing the biggest games of the season, the biggest games in your history, and you don't even know who's calling plays. That your quarterback and your running back and your leading wide receiver is probably 1 foot out the door, probably following their former head coach. I mean, Lane Kiffin is tweeting out Trinidad flags, just like he was every single day as the head coach of Ole Miss, because I think he fully expects Trinidad Chambliss to follow him to LSU. So I hate that for Ole Miss. I really do. I would hate that for any team in the country if they had to face the biggest games in the history of their program with all of these question marks. But I don't know what would have been better other than staying.
Yeah, and I don't know.
You can't have your cake and eat it too.
I don't know who Ole Miss could have hired that would have been ready to jump in today and solve any of these problems. Like, this is all broken. All I'm asking is for somebody, next time everybody sits there and says, oh my God, the calendar. Oh my God, I can't believe a coach did this. Oh my God. Instead of just screaming about it, tell me how you'd solve it, because I don't think that this could have been handled any differently in a way that still wouldn't have derailed Ole Miss's season, that still wouldn't have put us in the exact situation we're in. We'll get some more thoughts on it coming up. We're just getting started on this. Got a lot of NFL we're going to break down also. We'll ask Bobby Carpenter about it a little later in the show. We'll ask Stephen Godfrey about it a little later in the show. But coming up, are the Bills back after a big win against Pittsburgh? Josh Allen passes Cam Newton for the most rushing touchdowns by a quarterback in NFL history with his 76th yesterday as the Bills take down the Steelers in a big win. They don't just beat Pittsburgh, they absolutely crush Pittsburgh to the point that the crowd was chanting "Fire Tomlin" throughout the course of the game. And now all of a sudden we got to figure out, are we in on this? Are the Bills suddenly back to Super Bowl contenders, Caroline?
100%. 1000% the Bills are Super Bowl contenders because what we saw yesterday, now granted, that's a not great Pittsburgh Steelers team that's banged up, but we saw the Bills without their two starting tackles run probably better than we've seen them run all season long. We've seen them play better defense than, I would say that's a top defensive performance that we've seen from the Bills all season long. That on a day where Josh Allen wasn't Superman because he didn't have to be, the run game and the defense stepped up. I mean, James Cook, 144 yards. We saw Ray Davis get involved in the run game, and he's really primarily been a special teams kick return type of guy, but we saw him get some action in the run game, 9 carries, 62 yards, 7 yards a crack. And then defensively, you see them hold the Steelers to just 7 points to 166 total yards. I mean, it was pure and utter domination from the Bills on a day where they didn't play their cleanest football. They turned the ball over, they played a little sloppy, but they still dominated the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think that shows on, a Bills team that we can see be hot and cold and have bad days and then come back and look like Super Bowl contenders the next week. I think we have enough of a sample size, given the bad. We can't ignore the bad because we've seen some bad from this Bills team, but we've also seen enough good to consider them legitimate Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah, and why not? I mean, this is where the moment for me comes with the what's your yeah, but. And I think if you go through the AFC standings right now, it's pretty easy to find a yeah, but on a lot of these teams. This is not the AFC of last year. This is not the AFC of 2 or 3 years ago. Usually at this time of the year, we're sitting here saying, man, the Bills look elite, the Ravens look elite, and the Chiefs look incredible. Which one of them is going to come out of the AFC? That's our usual conversation by December 1st. This year, the Chiefs wouldn't even be in the playoffs, right? The Ravens look like they're hanging on for dear life, and the Bills are up and down. But in this year's AFC, why not Buffalo? Part of this is James Cook, who you just mentioned. Like, as much as we talk about Josh Allen, the Bills' offense is always, to me, going to be, is there somebody else that can also get rolling so that Josh Allen doesn't have to do literally everything by himself? We saw that yesterday. And when he gets rolling to that level, when James Cook gets rolling to that level, everything gets easier for the entire offense. December football, when you have to play in cold and gross environments and it's just going to be mucky, ugly football, I think the Bills can run their way through it. And look at the odds to win the AFC. We see the Bills up here, and I think that has to do a lot with proof of concept. Like, we have no idea. If your argument is, well, I mean, Josh Allen, the Bills can't melt down with 12 seconds left in a playoff game. Okay. What have we ever seen from the Broncos in a playoff game that lets us know how they'll handle 12 seconds left? What have we ever seen from this version of the Patriots or the Colts in the playoffs to let us know how their quarterbacks respectively will handle playoff pressure, right? Like, so there is some moment here where, as bad as it feels like it's easy to pile on for the things that have gone wrong for the Bills this year. They're 8-4. They're 8-4 with Josh Allen, who is absolutely, as we've said many times on this show, when he is Superman, it's almost impossible to beat him. When they run the football, it's almost impossible to beat him. Like, the Bills have the necessary pieces if they can just string together the rest of their offense. That's a lot of ifs, Caroline, but there's too many ifs in the AFC for me not to feel like they at least have a chance at the Super Bowl combo.
Yeah, every team in the AFC has an if. I mean, show me a team in the AFC that you feel like, oh, yeah, this team absolutely has what it takes to, just coast to the Super Bowl. Show me a team in the AFC that you wholeheartedly trust. There isn't one. I think the Bills are the closest thing to the team in the AFC that I wholeheartedly trust because we at least have a proof of concept of what this team looks like in the postseason, that we have a starting quarterback that has legitimate postseason experience and has consistently been back in the conversation year over year. And I think you look at James Cook, he might be the biggest X factor for this team because on the Bills' path to a Super Bowl, you're going to need Josh Allen to be Josh Allen, Superman, put the cape on, what he was against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just a couple of weeks ago. Like, you're going to need those kinds of days from Josh Allen to take down some of the defenses that we've seen in the AFC and that they're going to have to get through and on their path to a Super Bowl. But James Cook, if James Cook is doing what he was doing yesterday, like I said, you don't need Josh Allen to be Superman, that you have the ultimate X factor to fall back on a day if the pass game isn't getting going. I mean, yesterday with the weather and it was so windy, like there was no way there was going to be a path for the Bills to win through the air. So they did it on the ground. And James Cook is the kind of running back that you can rely on to that extent.
Well, and to that point, when you look at the other side of this matchup, TJ Watt for the Steelers said afterwards he'd never seen a team run the same running play so many times in a game. They couldn't stop
over and over and over again.
This was such a reminder of exactly how broken the Pittsburgh Steelers are. And Caroline, I've talked a lot, and we've talked a lot about how right I was about the Colts. I mean, that was maybe my best take of the summer, right? But 2 months before that, I was sitting with Frank Schwab on Inside Coverage, and I said very loudly that I thought the Steelers would start as one of the hottest teams in the AFC, and that by the middle of the season, when the schedule got tough, that they would find their way to their first losing season under Tomlin, and that there's not really any wins above replacement for Aaron Rodgers over Mason Rudolph. We saw all of that last night. The Steelers are so wildly broken, and the crowd chanting fire Tomlin, and I've sat here so many times and said, great, if you want to fire Tomlin, he's going to go get a job tomorrow. That being said, I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and I say, why not move on? Why not move forward? Because this is as broken as I can ever remember Pittsburgh being. If you just take a look at the core foundational pieces of talent, and then the coaching staff, the front office, the way the money's been spent, I think it's pretty hard not to see that the Steelers are in the worst shape in their entire division over the next 3 years. And yes, I'm including the Cleveland Browns, because the Browns at least have superstars on the defensive side, and you understand what they're trying to do. They need a quarterback. Great. Well, the Steelers went all in this offseason. They spent a ton of money on veteran players this offseason, and they suck. They were never a good football team. They just beat up on bad football teams, and it's getting worse and worse throughout the course of this season. Now, I don't know that you're going to find a better coach than Mike Tomlin. I really don't. But something is broken in Pittsburgh, and I don't know how you fix it without a massive reset. And when you start talking about massive reset, where you're going to be drafting in the middle of this thing, you don't have a replacement at quarterback. You have old talent that's not living up to it. You have a defense that you spent a ton of money on that turns out is kind of pointless. Everything has gone wrong for the Steelers. There's no easy way to fix everything being wrong. That's a multi-year rebuild, and I think Pittsburgh is staring that right in the face.
It's time to have maybe some uncomfortable conversations about the Pittsburgh Steelers, because you say Mike Tomlin will get a job tomorrow. 100%, I 1,000% agree with that. Any team that's looking for a head coach would call Mike Tomlin up yesterday and say, get your butt in this building for an interview. I don't think that should be reason to give the Pittsburgh Steelers pause to not fire Mike Tomlin. Because think about, like, in a relationship, if you are not happy with your significant other, you don't not break up with them because they would get a new significant other tomorrow. You're saying, well, it's not working for us now, so I have to move on from you. And look, Mike Tomlin, I think, is one of the best coaches in the NFL. Mike Tomlin will be in Canton. I have so much respect for Mike Tomlin, but it's getting stale. And I feel like the Pittsburgh Steelers have been the exact same team for the last 10 years, 5+ years. They've been the same team. They are so stuck in the mucky middle that, is it at this point, and maybe I'm wrong, but at this point, is it worth it for Steelers fans and for the Pittsburgh Steelers organization to roll the dice and find a worse coach just for the possibility that it could be better, just for a fresh perspective, just for something new and something different in that front office and on that coaching staff? Maybe not. Maybe Steelers fans are yelling at me and saying, no, don't move on from Tomlin. But I'm just saying it might be time to have the conversation that it's time for something new in Pittsburgh. Because while things are absolutely dreadful in Cleveland, and I feel for Browns fans, I think what might be even worse than being terrible is being good enough, but also not bad enough. 9-8, 8-9, which is exactly where the Steelers are at 500, 6-6. It's exactly where the Steelers have been for a very long time. What's their path to their next franchise quarterback? What's their path to patching up all of the holes that they have now that are filled by injured, old, and expensive players? What's their path to finding elite like position players? What's their path to finding their franchise receiver, their franchise running back? I don't know. There are way too many issues on this Steelers team now, and not having a clear path to getting back into contention might be even worse than being terrible.
I get so torn on
That's
this
so funny.
as I was reminded. Yeah, it is. I was reminded yesterday by social media that now that the Raiders have been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, they haven't had a playoff win since 2003. That would be the longest streak, second longest streak in the NFL behind the Dolphins. So I'm torn on this. I've watched as a fan. I've watched what suck looks like for a decade in a row, where you might have a moment where you pop through, but it's not because you're good. You pop through because you got lucky for a second, then you're right back to the sea of suck. I appreciate the fact that the Steelers have always found a way to win games, and I know Steelers fans don't appreciate that. I think the grass is always greener on the other side. Like the hardest part about moving on from somebody like Tomlin is, again, like if you just go through the litany, the laundry list of different coaches that we've seen for, teams that stink. If you go through the laundry list of Browns coaches, you go through the laundry list of Raiders coaches, go through the laundry list of Jags coaches or Titans coaches, you find out how hard it is to find a great one. And Mike Tomlin is certainly a great one. That doesn't change. Oh, you're right. The message has obviously died there. So at some point, the Steelers are going to have to find faith in their own ability to identify the next Mike Tomlin. That's easier said than done, but they're going to have to believe in that. I will say, Adam Schefter has made it very clear this morning throughout the course of the day on ESPN that he does not believe there is any scenario where the Pittsburgh Steelers will fire Mike Tomlin. That, frankly, the way that will eventually come to an end, when it comes to an end, is a mutual decision to part ways. So that becomes a question of, does Tomlin want to move on? And I do believe that Adam is not the type to come out and report that so matter of fact, unless he has a really good sense of information from behind the scenes. So I don't think that there's an easy answer to this if the Steelers want to let him go out on his own terms. But it might be best for the Steelers and best for Tomlin. Sometimes, remember, Andy Reid was supposedly not going to ever be capable of winning the big one for Philadelphia. They had to move on. It's worked out for the Eagles, and it's worked out for Kansas City. Maybe Tomlin moving out somewhere else and getting a quarterback, because you can't win if you don't have one. Maybe if he can find that quarterback, he can refine that magic. And maybe by the Steelers separating from Tomlin, a new voice comes in, a new direction. They can find their new sense. But I will remind everybody, from the outset of this season, this was broken. Because if your answer was, we're going to go all in on Aaron Rodgers, you still didn't have a future at the position. So now you don't have this season flying for you. You don't have a future at the position. You don't have much that you can bank on. We'll keep breaking it down. Got a lot we're going to get into over the course of the next couple hours. But we're going to get back to some college football with somebody that knows OHIO better than anybody. Bobby Carpenter going to join us next. The Broncos win 10 or more games in back-to-back season for the first time since Peyton Manning's 2015 team. Denver ended that season as Super Bowl champions. They get a wild, late-night, dramatic overtime win over the Commanders 27-26, thanks to a Commanders attempt at a two-point conversion at the end of overtime that failed. And now I'm just trying to figure out, we were just talking about the Bills and how much we believe in them. Caroline Fenton, you willing to say Broncos Super Bowl contender?
They are Super Bowl contenders because they just constantly find ways to win. On a day where that defense, that vaunted defense, that haunted defense, that defense that is one of the best, if not the best in the National Football League, doesn't have its best day. They gave up, 75 yards on the ground in the first half? That was the highest clip that they have all season long, when they make Marcus Mariota look far better than a career backup, which is what Marcus Mariota is at this point, when the Commanders have found more offensive firepower and offensive consistency than they have all year long without Jaden Daniels. And they still find a way to win. When the defense is getting sliced and diced and not having their best day, but Nick Bonito, who has been one of their most consistent defensive players, steps up in the moment where they need it most, batting down the two-point conversion. That's what makes this Broncos team so dangerous to me, is one, they will find ways to win. And two, as we saw last night, they'll find ways to win not even on their best day. Now, look, this is a Commanders team that is done. They're done for this season. Jaden Daniels is done. They have their backup, and Marcus Mariota is fine at absolute best. But they played well last night. But the Broncos still found a way to win. And I think that it makes this Broncos team even more dangerous on a night when they don't have it. They don't have their A game. They don't have their best. They still find a way to win when they need to. When the AFC is so mucky, when the AFC is so weird and so funky, they just consistently find ways to win. It's 9 straight at this point?
Yeah, it's 9 straight of just head scratcher after head scratcher. And you're right. I don't know what to make of just find a way to win, because I could certainly look at Marcus Mariota last night, Mariota, as they pointed out on the broadcast, 28 of 50 for 294 throwing. 10 rushes for 55 yards. Marcus Mariota was the absolute superstar of this game for Washington last night, which makes no sense against that Broncos defense. I cannot make that make sense. But also, I cannot make that make sense is really what I will write on my tombstone if I'm asked to write a quote about Bo Nix. Bo Nix, yesterday was maddening to me because as he's falling down, he makes an amazing throw for a touchdown that they've shown on SportsCenter 100 times. And you look at it and say, my God, the touchdown to Courtland Sutton was such a nice throw. And you look at it and say, my God. And then there's other times he's standing in the pocket and you just look at it and the ball hits the grass and you're like, I don't even know who you were trying to throw the football to. So it is crazy to me that Bo at times will just make the best highlight play that you've ever seen. And then all of a sudden, he misses the mundane. And to the point we've talked about a bunch with Bo and the Broncos, there is a part of me that, man, I don't know how much I trust Bo Nix, but I also know last night when the game went to overtime, I trusted the hell out of Bo Nix. There's just this, we've already seen so much of it from clutch. So this is a Denver team that last night couldn't run the ball to save their life. RJ Harvey was worthless running the football last night. I watched Bo Nix absolutely do everything you could ask him to do in such a highlight way, but it's just the maddening part of Bo. I don't know how much I trust him, even though I certainly trust when he needs to make a play, he will make a play.
And I'll go back to our conversation that we had about the Bills. I don't know how much I trust very many of these quarterbacks in the AFC picture. I don't trust Trevor Lawrence. I don't really trust CJ Stroud. I don't trust Daniel Jones. What quarterbacks in the AFC do we trust? But I do know that when the Broncos had to have it in overtime and late in that game, Bo Nix stepped up and Bo Nix did what Bo Nix needed to do. So even though I know that Bo Nix is good for a mind-numbingly, just horrific interception pretty much every single game, even though I know that Bo Nix isn't going to carry his team the way that we see a Josh Allen carry his team, we have at least enough of a sample size that the defense will say, hey, we'll do enough. You just have to do enough too. We will carry a majority of this load. and you just have to do enough, and you just have to not give the game away or give the ball away. Well, last night, the defense didn't take care of it. The defense didn't carry a brunt of that load. So Bo Nix said, okay, I'll stand up, I'll step up, and I'll do it. Is he good for that consistently, week over week, game over game, down over down, quarter over quarter? No. But they found a way. They just keep finding ways. And you always say, Fitzy, better to be lucky than good. I don't know if the Broncos were lucky last night or if they were just good enough, but that's kind of been the story of this Broncos team. They've been just good enough against the good teams and the bad teams.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And I'm going to ask the guys if we could pull back up Luke McCown's tweet that he had, because certainly Luke McCown had a tweet last night about the greatness. He says, Bo Nix will win a Super Bowl and an MVP in Denver during his career. He is and can be that good. I love this. And Luke certainly knows more about quarterback than most of us will ever. He'll forget more than most of us know. I do laugh at these narratives, though, because we're sitting here in a spot now like declaring Bo Nix will win a Super Bowl when we still haven't seen Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson win a Super Bowl, or Justin Herbert win a Super Bowl, or Joe Burrow win a Super Bowl. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit right now on just the inevitability of championships, when championships in the AFC have been wildly difficult to come by. That being said, you are right. Like, there's a line between better to be lucky than good, and I don't know where that line is, because a couple of years ago we watched an Eagles team jump out to 10-1 that we knew wasn't really a 10-1 team, right? And then when they lost in the playoffs, nobody was that surprised by it. Right now, we're looking at a Broncos team that, look at that, they have 8 wins in one-score games in 2025. 8 wins in one-score games. So, like, clutch is part of their DNA right now. And when your defense is as good as theirs is, man, you're going to be in every game. So it's a little bit like Mahomes for the last several years until this year. The running comment was you can't beat them in one-score games and you can't blow them out. Well, that seems to be the method of the Broncos. I don't know that there's a more I wouldn't be shocked sort of seesaw for me than there is for the Denver Broncos. I wouldn't be shocked at all for the Broncos to get to the Super Bowl this year. I also wouldn't be shocked for Bo Nix to lay an egg in the first round of the playoffs and they lose by 10. Like, I don't know. I know that this is a very good team. I don't know the floor versus the ceiling for them, though.
I feel the same way, though, about the Texans. I feel the same way about the Colts. I feel the same way about whoever wins the AFC North. I feel the same way about the Jags. Wouldn't be surprised if they can play spoiler at any point in the playoffs, but also wouldn't be surprised if they get bounced in the first round. But I do want to give credit where credit is due. We saw a beautiful catch from Treylon Burks last night for a touchdown. I covered Treylon Burks in his entire career at Tennessee. I was really hard on Treylon Burks, and Treylon Burks has had a really difficult and just unlucky career. You know, he showed up to rookie minicamp overweight. He couldn't finish practice. He suffered injury after setback, and it was a really brutal and unfortunate start for a guy's career that had all the pressure in the world on him. Remember, the Titans traded A.J. Brown away and drafted Treylon Burks to replace him. He never came to fruition. So look at that. He's getting his due by OBJ with a very OBJ-esque catch last night. So I don't know what Treylon Burks' future and his career looks like, but I do love to see a really good guy who has just been, suffered setback after setback, get his flowers and get his due last night. So credit to Treylon Burks.
That's a good call by you. Hell of a moment for somebody that has waited a long time to have a positive moment. We do have some breaking news we want to get you caught up on. Speaking of the AFC West, we got news this morning. Justin Herbert will require surgery on his broken left hand, his non-throwing hand. If you watched the game yesterday, he left the game for a bit after being driven to the ground by Jeremy Chin on a play. Hit his hand, couldn't really tell what the full extent of it is. When he came back out, he was wearing a glove with some fingers taped together. That's never a good sign. The Chargers won that game 31-14, but certainly Herbert was limited after that point in the game, not able to get under center at all. Definitely changed the Chargers offense. Didn't hurt them at all against just a lackluster, terrible Raiders team, but something to keep an eye on. The procedure will happen today. Herbert expects to play in the Chargers' next game, which is on Monday night against the Eagles. So we'll see how quickly he can bounce back, but also importantly, see what it means for their offense moving forward. Are you Caroline, you concerned about this?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the non-throwing hand, so it's at least the best option of the two. But for him to be back in their next game is pretty staggering. And look, that I don't know if that's going to affect Justin Herbert moving forward or not. Again, it's not his throwing hand, but still, that concerns me, especially for a Chargers team that's still in the hunt and has kind of a grind of a schedule upcoming.
Yeah, Trey Lance, the backup quarterback there, he was in for a brief amount of time against the Raiders. So if they have to let Trey cook, we'll see what that looks like. Also, should be noted, Chargers would be taking on an Eagles team with a beefy defensive line, while their offensive line is
And they're
quite the
pissed
opposite
off
right now. Yeah, Justin Herbert's going to take some hits in that game. So thoughts and prayers for his hand and his pain management. We'll keep you updated on any information we get moving forward. In the meantime, coming up next, Bobby Carpenter knows Ohio State better than anybody. We'll get his thoughts on if we're paying enough attention to the number one team of the land. We'll do that next. Nine years in the great stage of Ohio. I think he gets it. Dripping with humility and class. There's not another man on this earth who I would want leading this program. That's from Bobby Carpenter talking about Buckeyes coach Ryan Day after a huge win over Michigan. Bobby Carpenter joining us now, brother. Let's just start there. What did it mean? Because, look, I do phoners in Ohio. The number of times that I talk to radio stations in Ohio and they tell me a national championship doesn't matter because Ryan Day can't beat Michigan. What does it mean for Day and the program that they finally get that monkey off their back?
I think it's a big deal, obviously. He won his first game in 2019, but it's been so many years since that's happened. They had COVID, they've had 4 losses. And right, wrong, or indifferent, we talked about when they expanded the playoff, with college football lose its fastball, which meaning, every game in the regular season matters. All these rivalries matter. And while they may mean less in the grand scheme of your record and ability to accomplish your goals, the emotional impact it still has from losing to one of your rivals is incredible. And for Ohio State, this is the game. It's something they've leaned in on. And I give Ryan credit. He's been here now 7 years, and he's starting to do it his own way. And coming in as a first-time head coach, taking over for Urban, he kind of inherited a lot of maybe what he was doing. But I think winning a national championship last year, guys, that liberated him. And now you're seeing a guy that has really grown into being, in my opinion, one of the finest head coaches in college football.
This is one of the greatest rivalries in sports, not just in college sports. So it's always going to be high emotions. It's always going to mean a lot, but it was palpable. After that game, you could feel it, that it was just this sense of relief of like, we finally get back in the win column against this team. I do want to talk about what the defense has meant to Ohio State all season long because it's nasty. But I want to talk about Julian Sayin because I don't think that we are talking about him nearly enough. The highest QBR in college football. If you were to make a case for Julian Sayin to be the Heisman Trophy winner this season, what would be your case?
Well, I think it just comes down to efficiency and how unflappable he's been. And, the guy, his completion percentage is hovering right around 80%. I think he set the regular season record passing Bo Nix on Saturday. And so, he has great weapons on the outside, but you show me a great quarterback who doesn't have great receivers. And, that guy really doesn't exist. You need to have players around you that help you. But for being a redshirt freshman, a kid from Southern California, going into a game where it was, in the high 20s, low 30s, and throwing an interception right off the jump, and then being able to bounce back, being unflappable. I think that's the thing that's impressed me the most about him is how he's been able to be a leader, how he stayed consistent, and each and every week he comes out and performs.
I mean, he looks like he's 12 years old in that picture. I just can't get over it. He looks so young in that. I'm just saying, Caroline, he looks so young.
He does look like a baby. He is a baby. He's not playing like one. And neither is this defense. Where would you rank this Ohio State defense in the history of great Ohio State defenses?
It has a chance to be right near the top. Now, so much of that, Caroline, comes down to how you finish and how you play well in these big games. But against Texas and against Michigan, you're holding those teams to single digits. I want to say they've done that like 7 or 8 times this year, averaging about 7 points a game. Matt Patricia's been a huge, huge part of it. A guy that some people questioned the hiring when Ryan Day brought him in. They looked at what maybe he did in Detroit or maybe post New England or maybe as an offensive coordinator. But he is one of the smartest coaches I've ever been around. He cares a lot about his players. I think this team has an opportunity that it could even be better than last year's defense, which I thought was maybe one of the best in the pantheon that they've had. And this year they've got a ton of really talented players. They played great in big moments. And we'll see. They're going to have a chance here against Indiana, who, in my opinion, is one of the best teams in the country. They've got probably the other front runner of the Heisman Trophy in Fernando Mendoza, who has been unbelievable. They're physical. They like to run the ball. And this will be a huge challenge for them. But if they're able to, answer the bell with that and continue to play really well throughout the rest of this playoff run, well, we'll see. They may end up being the very top.
All right, Bobby, I'll be the old man in the room for a second because I was living on tour buses trying to make it music back in the early 2000s. You were playing the game at that point, right? So our producer came in and said, this Ohio State defense, best of all time. I said the 2001 Miami Hurricanes would like a word, but I want your expertise on it because you were playing right around that era. Does this year's defense have the chance? Great run. Do they have the chance to be better than the 01 Hurricanes?
I think they're going to have a number of really talented NFL players. Like you start looking at talent on the team. I mean, they're going to have a lot of first-round draft picks over this year and the coming years that are playing significant moments. The guy they're showing right there, Arvell Reese, has been absolutely phenomenal. And, he does it with class and humility. There's Sonny Styles, Caden McDonald, obviously Caleb Downs. They've been playing really, really well at a number of positions. Caden Curry was up for some awards here earlier this year. So I think they've got a chance to do it. But the reason that Miami team was so good in 01 is you watched them vanquish all comers. So they've got a chance now that they're going to be playing, against the best of the best, other teams with elite offenses. And can you keep those teams under 17 points? That's been the goal. I think that that's a realistic goal. And if they can continue to do that, then you know what, Fitzy, I can conceivably give them that crown.
And this defense is going to face its toughest challenge yet in the Big Ten title game. You mentioned it. Ohio State, Indiana, unstoppable force versus immovable object. I mean, one of the best offenses in the country versus one of the best, if not the best defenses in the country. What does Ohio State have to do to beat Indiana?
Well, you say the best offense is best defense. I'll take it one step further. I think these are two of the best coach teams in the country. You look at what Curt Cignetti's done at Indiana. They don't beat themselves. They're physical. They're tough. They're efficient on both sides of the football. They have a relentless leader there. And Fernando Mendoza, defensively, you watched him go into Autzen and beat up Oregon. They beat them 30-20. They won by 10. And that was with throwing a pick six. This team is really, really good. If they don't turn the football over, they're incredibly tough to beat. They played Ohio State pretty tough last year. It wasn't until they had a Caleb Downs punt return for a touchdown that kind of flipped the momentum in Columbus. So, going in there, Julian Saint's got to be what he's been all year. He's got to be efficient. He can't turn the football over. This defense has to try to find a way to shut down that Indiana run game because you can't allow them to be two-dimensional. And then the last piece comes down to what you saw on Saturday. I knew as soon as Carnell Tate and J.J. Smith were dressed that this team was going to be good because they're capable of big, explosive plays on the outside, and they can do things that really no other team in college football can do right now.
So, Bobby, if this were number 1 Alabama versus number 2 Georgia, I feel like the entire world would be melting down about, oh, my God, this is the game of the millennium. We've never seen anything like it. What's it going to take for Ohio State, Indiana to start to get that level of attention?
Well, I think a little bit Indiana and Vanderbilt, they suffer from the branding disease where historically, they've never been great. And so it's still in your mind. Both of those teams, I put them in the same bucket because last year they were both really good. Indiana made it to the playoffs. Fell a little short against Notre Dame, but you've got to be on the scene for a while. People have to be comfortable with you as a big brand. Boise State was able to kind of break through that as a group of five school. Then ultimately you had Clemson do that and got rid of the Clemsoning. Like there's been teams that have been able to break through and do it, but usually, guys, it's the blue bloods. You look at the teams that have won national championships. A lot of times it's reoccurring characters, but in this new 12-team playoff world where there's the transfer portal, where there's NIL, and you see Indiana, a school that has a lot of financial resources, finally get good at football. Now you're finally seeing those resources, I think, get poured into football. And so, for it to be this, it's probably going to be like this in 2 or 3 years. They've got to be on the scene. But I think with Kirk Cignetti being there, I think you're going to see this Indiana team on the scene for quite some time.
And the emerging success of Indiana, Vanderbilt, not necessarily historical powerhouses, that's definitely cranked the temperature up on a lot of the seats of head coaches at some of these big-time blue blood premier programs. We saw it, Florida, Auburn, LSU, Penn State, all moving on from their head coaches, and I think it's largely because of the emergence of some of these smaller programs. But we talk about Indiana, Ohio State, Big Ten championship game. We'll also have a clashing of other national championship caliber teams, Georgia and Alabama in the SEC championship game, BYU, Texas Tech, Big 12, ACC, maybe not so much, but how should, in your opinion, the committee view these conference championship games? Should the loser be penalized?
I'm not a fan of that. And I said this last year when they first started doing it. And, you had the conference champions were all getting buys. And this year it's a little bit different, obviously, with just going to straight seeding. But if you earn the right to play in your conference championship, you shouldn't get penalized for losing it. There's no way you should slide out. Now, maybe we could move seeding around a little bit. I mean, if Bama absolutely gets destroyed by Georgia, I don't think they should fall out of the playoff, but they should probably have that last at-large spot. But I'm not a fan of when you've done something so well throughout the regular season that you have a chance to play an extra game and then you get penalized for it. Because then what's the incentive for really playing in it? You can play it safe. You can get a home game, probably not get a bye, but then you also don't have to worry about going on the road. And so if we start to, incentivize big wins, which are key, you want to have those big wins, but then we start penalizing a loss that 95% of the rest of college football isn't going to be playing in. I'm not a huge fan of that, and I think that goes for kind of all the conferences.
All right, then if you were on the committee, how would you handle Ole Miss knowing that they now don't have an offensive coaching staff?
Gosh, that's rough, and those guys have done a great job. The bailout that they ultimately have is that they're going to say they don't have a data point of without Lane Kiffin as the head coach. So they can say, well, we just held him with status quo. They're probably not going to get a bye. Do they get a home game? Like, that's the question. Like, how do you handle that and how do you treat that? I think some of that comes down to ultimately how these schools play in the conference championship games and what that looks like. If you want to slide them back into 9 or 10, okay, I get that, without having Lane Kiffin, who, believe me, he is a monstrous part of this team. And, they're tasked with getting the 12 best, not the most deserving. And they deserve to be there. I think they are definitely one of the 5 or 6 best teams, 6, 7 best teams in all of college football. But Lane was a huge piece of that. So I don't think you can ultimately knock them out, but there will come some nuance to how this seeding comes out.
And you do a great job covering all of college football, Ohio State, the entire Big Ten. So when you look at this Penn State job, a college football playoff team, less than a year ago, now looking for a new head coach, if you were the AD at Penn State, who would you hire?
Man, I don't know. I guess it's a great question because, Pat Fitzgerald just got scooped up by Michigan State, and I think that's probably been the steal of this hiring cycle. I know Matt Campbell, they haven't been great at Iowa State here, this season, but I think he's a program builder and he's someone that gives you a lot of stability and knows the Midwest. And if you give him the resources, has the ability to have some success. People have talked a lot about Brian Hartline. Like, he's never been a head coach before, but you've seen what he's done in that receiver room at Ohio State. You've watched what he's done now as an offensive coordinator without Chip Kelly doing a masterful job on Saturday against Michigan. And then one of the things that's interesting, and I've heard some people throw this out there, and I don't know that you would ever get him to admit this, but I don't know how much Kalen DeBoer actually enjoys being the head coach at Alabama. And being the guy that follows the guy is never easy. And they might win an SEC championship on Saturday. And there's still people that aren't going to be happy with him. And so if that's the case, like you have to ask yourself, what's happiness and where can I find it, and enjoying and coaching and doing what I love. So, I mean, I would say he's a huge dark horse. The sad thing is, like, a lot of these other coaches have been scooped up. I mean, I thought Alex Golish, who, grew up in Columbus, Ohio. He was a student assistant when I was at Ohio State, has done a great job at Florida. I think he'll do a great job at Auburn or South Florida. I think he would have been a tremendous fit, but it's going to come down to the uniqueness of that job. It's a kind of an isolated school in the middle of PA. And so there's a handful of guys that are out there. I know their AD. I mean, he likes to swing big. And so I'm anticipating that he has something in the bag, and he's just kind of maybe waiting to reveal this until after conference championship Saturday, or maybe even till middle of the playoffs.
All right. So, Bobby, before we get you out of here, not Ohio State, obviously, that's the team that you know the best. If you're looking at the rest of the lexicon of the college football teams that are going to make the playoff, who do you think's the scariest team out there?
I think Georgia's been playing really good football, and I always look at how are you playing at this moment. There's actually two teams that I think are playing really well and have been for about the last 6 to 8 weeks, and that's Georgia and that's Notre Dame. And everybody gets into the Miami and Notre Dame argument. I mean, and I know Notre Dame hasn't played maybe the most vicious schedule down the stretch, but they handled Southern Cal. They looked really good against Pitt. And then Georgia's kind of the same thing. While they may have stumbled early and they're maybe not those dominant Georgia teams of back-to-back national championships, Gunnar Stockton's looked really good. Their defense is coming around, and they seem to make big plays at the biggest times. And, winning against Georgia Tech in a rivalry game, that matters. Those games are tough. They're always going to be slugfest. But those are the other two teams I would look at and say are playing some of the best football right now as we flip the calendar to December.
Follow him on Twitter at BCarp3. Check out the Bobby Carpenter Show. And then if you're ever lucky enough to be in Columbus, just find him in a bar, because I'm telling you, my guy never pays for a drink. All you got to do is be adjacent to Bobby Carpenter, and it flows free all day long. Bobby, appreciate your time, man. Thanks for joining us. Good luck watching the rest of the season.
And enjoy Chuck E. Cheese back there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we didn't get to see if he was any good with the arcade games. Next time. All right, one of the biggest stunners in the NFL yesterday. Carolina takes down the Rams. What does it mean? We'll tell you next. Oh, the NFC West is a wild place. Where the wild things are there. As the 49ers get the win, the Rams get the loss over the course of the weekend. It was a stunning stunning weekend for the NFC West. Just when we were ready to loudly proclaim that the one team we could trust was the Rams, we now can't trust them. And then we're trying to figure out what to make of the rest of this absolutely wild division. Let's start with Seattle, though, okay? Seattle absolutely dismantles the Vikings. So, Caroline Fenton, what do we make of the Vikings, or what do we make of Seattle in that win?
I mean, Seattle, they're absolutely Super Bowl contenders. I mean, they are one of the elites of all of the elite teams that we have seen in the NFC West. And in the Sam Darnold's Bowl, it was on full display of how foolish the Minnesota Vikings were moving on from Sam Darnold. They got too cute with it. They didn't want to pay him the money. They said, we drafted JJ McCarthy in the first round. We're going to roll the dice with an unproven JJ McCarthy. And it right now has blown up in their face. Like, I think it's fair to say right now, the Seattle Seahawks will go to multiple NFC championship games before the Minnesota Vikings find their franchise quarterback. And I wholeheartedly believe that because, one, it's really difficult to find your franchise quarterback. It looks like right now, JJ McCarthy ain't it. And right now, there are too many bad teams in the NFL that are going to be looking to draft quarterbacks in this upcoming draft. And I don't think there's enough good quarterbacks in this draft. Like, the Vikings aren't going to be in a position, I don't think, where things stand right now to draft a quarterback. So they're going to have to run it back with JJ McCarthy more likely than not. Of course, anything can happen in free agency. Anyone can draft up in the trade up in the draft, whatever it might be. But it's really hard to find a franchise quarterback. And right now, the Seahawks look like they are poised to make a run to the NFC Championship game. And as long as they have Sam Darnold, as long as they have the defense that they have playing at as high of a level as they are, I think the Seahawks are going to be in the conversation every single year moving forward.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt to me that the Seahawks are clearly one of the better teams in the NFC right now. They're going to be poised for a playoff run. We'll see what happens during that playoff run. Also, I know this. If Sam Darnold has a bad game, Vikings fans are going to immediately run to the Twitter and be like, oh, that's why we didn't want him. Okay, well, you know what's worse than throwing interceptions in big games and playoff games? Not getting any big games anymore. So the next time we want Kevin O'Connell to tell any of us that the Vikings haven't answered the quarterback position, we should loudly, collectively roll our eyes, because I listen to everybody that had been around the program over the course of the week, been around the franchise over the course of the week, tell me, even on the broadcast, oh, I don't remember the last time people in the building were this excited for a quarterback that could give them a spark. That spark was supposed to be Max Brosmer. And so on Fantasy Football Live yesterday, I sat there under our prop section, and I said, hammer the under in passing, because look at what he did in college. It is not going to translate. Well, what do you know? 19 of 30 for 126 yards, 4 picks. It was a pathetic effort at the quarterback position from somebody that simply wasn't ready to play quarterback in the NFL. And he was put in that position by the Vikings. He was put in that position by KOC. The Vikings have mishandled the position over and over and over again. And Vikings fans, you look foolish now, because every time I've said this, y'all come into my mentions and you immediately start yelling about the problems Darnold had in big games without acknowledging that you're now a 4-win football team. There's a very real world where you may not win another game this year. So let me ask you, what's worse, winning 14 games and losing in the playoffs because your quarterback had a 1-game meltdown, or is it worse to finish, 4-13 and not be high enough for a quarterback and not be low enough to actually have had a football season that was worth watching? Because congratulations, even with Justin Jefferson, that's where you are. This team was too talented to suck this much, and the Vikings have mishandled it so poorly that they're going to suck for a long time. I just have no faith. I have no faith in JJ. I have no faith in the quarterback position. I have no faith in the Vikings.
I don't have faith in JJ McCarthy because he can't stay healthy enough to get better. Like this past week, it was concussion protocol, and he's been on and off the field all season long, missed the entirety of his rookie season. And Kevin O'Connell, I'll have to give him credit. I think he has a very patient approach to developing young quarterbacks. He said, and I believe in it wholeheartedly, more often than not, franchises and organizations fail young quarterbacks far more than young quarterbacks fail organizations. And I do believe in a very slow burn approach to developing a young quarterback. But if he is so banged up, if JJ McCarthy is so consistently injured that he can't go out there, make mistakes, learn from the mistakes, and then not make them again, then how am I supposed to believe in the development of JJ McCarthy? I don't care if you have Kevin O'Connell, one of the greatest quarterback whisperers in the National Football League. If you can't be on the field, if you are not available, you can't get better. So now we're going to go into year 3 of the JJ McCarthy experience and still not have a big enough sample size to truly understand how much better JJ McCarthy can get or will get week over week. So I'm out on JJ McCarthy. I know Kevin O'Connell isn't. I know the Vikings at this point probably can't be, but I'm out on JJ McCarthy developing into a high-level quarterback. If anyone can do it, KOC can do it. But right now, I'm out.
Yeah, I'm out. Hopefully, I always root for players, so hopefully JJ proves me wrong, proves all of us wrong. All right, where 100%. Are we on the Rams then? The Rams turned around and they came out flat against Carolina. They were the one team over the course of the weekend. I was asked, who's the one team you trust the most in the NFL? And I, Swaggy, walked my way in saying the Rams. And then they go out and they lose to the Panthers. What do we make of it?
Yeah, look, credit to the Carolina Panthers because they have now 2 of the best wins in the NFC, beating the Packers at Lambeau and now taking down the big bad Los Angeles Rams that looks like the Super Bowl favorite going into Sunday. But I think that's more of an anomaly than it is an indictment on the Rams. I think it was a bad day at the office for Matthew Stafford, who has been more reliable and has taken better care of the football more than any other quarterback in the NFL this season. Having just a bad day at the office. But I will give credit to the Carolina Panthers. They took advantage of the mistakes that the Rams were making, and they found a way to win. Credit to the Panthers, because all the Panthers need to do right now is just keep winning football games. They're only a half a game back of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like the NFC South as a division is still very much so alive. But what this did show me about the Rams, though, is how important it is for them to get the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. Because it is so important for the Rams to have home field advantage and to be in the comfy, cozy dome confines of Los Angeles in the playoffs. Because yesterday in Charlotte, it was like 30 degrees. It was rainy. It was cold. It was windy. It was freezing. What's going to happen to Matthew Stafford when and if he has to go on the road to Philly, when and if he has to go on the road to Soldier Field, but it's going to be freezing and blustery? He's a 37-year-old quarterback with back problems who's from Georgia, played at Georgia, and has played in a dome his entire career. That is, I think, what that showed me yesterday, how important it is for Matthew Stafford and for this Rams team to be in the cozy confines of a dome in the postseason. I don't want to see this team on the road.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And by the way, right now, if the playoffs were to start today, the Chicago Bears would own home field advantage. So you're right. Everything would go through Soldier Field. That looks wildly different. Also, let's not get it twisted. We are at that spot now where they've only had the one head-to-head game. So Rams-Seahawks becomes a wild game in a few weeks because those teams have the same record. So as much as I've been sitting here ready to anoint the Rams are 9-3. The Seahawks are 9-3. There's a huge difference between winning the division and being the 2 seed or being the 5 seed and having to do even more work on the road, which I would absolutely hate for the Rams. So you see it there. They have the Lions coming up, which should be a big game. They have the Seahawks coming up. The rest of it is pretty much fluff. But that Seahawks game in Seattle, got to feel like that could be the deciding game for the NFC West. What about one other outcome that we had yesterday in the division? That comes in the form of the San Francisco 49ers, who I just feel like at some point, Caroline, we're going to have to admit that while it doesn't make a lot of sense, the 49ers are just really good. Like they went into this game in Cleveland. You just talked about having to play in the elements. While it wasn't rainy or snowing, it was windy as all get out. It was cold. The San Francisco 49ers are as beat up as you can be across the board. It was a chippy game at times. There was definitely some fighting going on in this game. There were all sorts of reasons to step back and wonder what San Francisco would look like. And instead, man, the 49ers just went out. They carved up the Browns defense, which is a strength. They put up 26 on a defense that was constantly with their back against the wall. But I just thought it was an impressive effort by San Francisco.
I think yesterday taught me I don't need to worry about the 49ers injuries anymore. Yes, they're banged up, and yes, they are a shell of themselves just in terms of availability. but the 49ers can still play with the best of them. I know it's a crummy, crappy Browns team, but still. I mean, the 49ers, as you said, go on the road in the Eastern time zone. It's absolutely freezing, and they have a day like that. I think that's so incredibly impressive. I think Robert Saleh deserves a raise. He deserves an extension. Give the man whatever he wants. No Nick Bosa, no Fred Warner, and the 49ers have still held their opponents to a combined 17 points the last 2 weeks. Held the Panthers to 9 and the Browns to 8. I mean, they gave up 40 something points to the Rams, and then they gave up 30 to the Bucks earlier in the season. Other than that, the 49ers haven't given up more than 26 points all season long, including how they've had to adjust after the Fred Warner and Nick Bosa injuries. I give so much credit to Robert Saleh in the way that he's been coaching up this defense. I give so much credit to this entire coaching staff because they've been riddled with injuries all season long. If it's not pass catchers, it's Brock Purdy. If it's not Brock Purdy, it's defensive players, whatever it might be. This 49ers team, as we all know, is so incredibly banged up, but they still find a way to win, and they are still very clearly in the playoff picture. That is so impressive.
They get the Titans next week, which will likely get them to 10 wins, right? No matter what happens from there, this beat up, banged up, they needed Mike in 2 weeks, they get the Titans on December 14th. That's their next game. When they step on the field against the Titans, they'll have a chance to get to 10 wins, despite having had Mac Jones as their starting quarterback for a good amount of this season, despite having all of the defensive injuries you just mentioned. You're right. They should offer Robert Saleh a raise, but the fact is Robert Saleh is going to end up being one of the most coveted head coaching candidates this year because he's done an absolutely incredible job, and it's probably time to look around and say, hey, maybe the failings of the Jets had more to do, I don't know, shocking take with the Jets than they did with Robert Saleh. So if you are the 49ers, you're going to prove it, though, because after the Titans, you get in Indianapolis against the Bears and against the Seahawks. They will end their season with 3 straight playoff caliber football teams. So they have 3 straight prove-it opportunities. But I'm just sort of at this, why not San Francisco? Brock Purdy looked much cleaner this week against the Browns. It looks like he knocked a little bit of that rust off. I do want to look at the Browns side of this because certainly everything when we talk about the Browns has to be about Shedeur. And I know that this isn't a great hot take, Caroline, but I watched every snap of that game. I actually had the audio on that game. I focused on that game. Shedeur was fine. And I know that we have to have this big, no, it was electric. We saw tremendous growth. Or, a huge step back. No, I mean, 16 to 25, 149, 1 touchdown. I thought he managed the game pretty well. There wasn't a lot out there for him. It was hard to make plays against that defense. There weren't guys flying open. I don't think he particularly held on to the ball too long. Like, everybody wants to make a big sweeping narrative. The problem is yesterday was what I think a lot of these games are going to be for the Browns. Like, Shedeur was fine. He wasn't good enough for me to sit here and say, they've got the quarterback of the future. And he wasn't bad enough for me to say, oh, no, they don't have the quarterback of the future, which is sort of the worst case scenario, but it's the way I think this is going to play out week in and week out.
Yeah, Shedeur wasn't the story of that game yesterday. And I think that's the best possible thing for Shedeur Sanders at this point, other than, hey, Shedeur went out and threw for 350 and 4 touchdowns. I think the story of this game was the 49ers coaching staff out-coaching Stefanski. I think the story of this game was the fact that the Browns special teams needs probably a majority of an overhaul. I think the story of this game was the 49ers defense. The story of this game was Brock Purdy bouncing back from a bad game and having a solid one. Shedeur Sanders has not shown me anything to prove that he belongs as a starting quarterback in the National Football League, but he's also shown me enough week over week that I want to see more. Like, I want to see how much more Shedeur Sanders can improve week over week. Like, he took care of the football, didn't throw an interception. He's still taking too many sacks, but I think that's something that he can continue to work on week over week. Like, I'm excited to see how Shedeur Sanders gets better week over week. We need to allow him to get better week over week. We need to give Shedeur Sanders the space to get better. Not every week do we need to have a sweeping hot take and a full resolution and conclusion on exactly who Shedeur Sanders is. That would be crazy to make a point blank conclusion about a 5th round quarterback after just 1 start or 2 starts. I've seen some good. I've seen some not so good. I've seen how he's gotten better. I've seen some areas where he needs to continue to get better. Overall, Shedeur wasn't the story. That's a good thing. He wasn't the reason why the Browns lost yesterday.
The Browns will take on the Titans as their next opponent. Funny back-to-back Titan conversation. They'll take on the Titans. That is a matchup where, okay, let's see what he looks like against one of the worst teams in the NFL. Well, let's see what he looks like against one of the worst defenses in the NFL. The Titans and Cam Ward are certainly going to be fired up against this to prove that they got their guy. There's already questions about Cam long-term for the Titans. So I think there's a lot on the line for both of these young quarterbacks to play particularly well. And it's rare. This is my word. I'll give you this. After the Titans, I'll be ready to make some sort of a take. If he plays particularly well against the Titans, that has to have meaning. If he plays poorly against the Titan, that has to have meaning. So I'm just trying to take it in a little bit bigger block before we freak out about everything. All right, it's time to move on to freaking out. We're going to get back to freaking out because that's what the college football weekend had us doing all across the land. Stephen Godfrey going to join us next. We'll get the right reaction to everything that happened with Lane coming up next. Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. The weekend coaching carousel. LSU hires Lane Kiffin. Ole Miss hires Pete Golding. Florida hires John Sumrall. Auburn hires Alex Golish. Arkansas hires Ryan Silverfield. Michigan State hires Pat Fitzgerald. I think we got it all. Boy, was there a bunch of it. We'll break it all down now with Stephen Godfrey, one of the hosts of College Football Inquirer, who joins us each Monday. So let's start with Lane. All right, considering all the comments about it, and this is Stephen, this is my whole point, is for everybody yelling about the calendar and for everybody yelling about how it could happen. How should this have gone down in a way that everybody wouldn't have their feelings hurt right now today? What could have actually happened?
Come on. This is Lane Kiffin. How many times did I say on this show he's going to make it about himself as long as humanly possible? That's exactly what he did. This was not some sort of riddle to solve, guys. Like, this was an impossible task to make this transition. If he wanted to go, there were a number of opportunities. And we're learning now that he had made his mind up pretty far in advance. This idea like, oh, I need tonight, I need this weekend, I need next week, we're going to delay the team meeting. The only thing that Lane Kiffin wanted that he didn't get was the reason why he delayed this out, which was that he truly believed that he should be able to coach Ole Miss through the playoffs while operating as LSU's head coach. That's it. This wasn't that hard. This wasn't that tricky. It wasn't even that big a deal, aside from the fact that you were leaving one SEC school to go to one of their arch rivals, which is certainly like a sensitive thing. It was the idea that you were going to hold both jobs at the same time, which is, functionally insane and was enabled by a lot of people in the media, specifically at ESPN. This is something I just wrote a column about at the Washington Post. Yeah, that's it. It wasn't that complicated. You just can't have both jobs at the same time. I know all of us right now, if we got hired by another media outlet, I'm sure Yahoo would just let us play it out for a month, right? Would you just do both jobs for a month?
Sure would be fun. Look, it is insane to think that Keith Carter, the athletic director at Ole Miss, would allow him to do that, actively recruit players to LSU as he is coaching them on a path to a championship. But I've seen, you've said, a lot of people at ESPN kind of pushing an agenda, so to speak. I've seen also a lot of people on social media blame the calendar, the college football calendar, and the way that it lies, that we are now in a position where Lane Kiffin is leaving a playoff team to go coach its bitter rival. I've seen the finger being pointed everywhere, at Ole Miss, at LSU, at Lane Kiffin. I will ask you, the position that we're in right now, the position that Ole Miss is in right now, they don't have a head coach going to the playoffs. Whose fault is this?
Lane Kiffin's. This is not some sort of problem endemic to college football. I don't think we're going to see this play out 1,000 times over. By the way, this weekend, potentially, if Duke wins the ACC, there's a strong likelihood that you're going to have James Madison and plus the American Conference winner in the playoff. If that happens, you'll have 3 playoff teams without a head coach. 3 playoff teams out of 12. Kind of amazing, right? Like that shouldn't be happening.
Crazy.
I'm not saying that we shouldn't visit the calendar. The calendar definitely needs work. But here's the thing about the calendar. Do you know why everyone's so frantic right now? Everyone is so caught up on, oh, well, he's got to take the job now, or there's this guy. The portal's about to open. The transfer portal's about to open. Coaches need to be hired, and there's high school recruiting to do. Do you know the coaches voted to put the portal when it is, right? Are we aware? The coaches did this. This past offseason, they determined the date for the portal because, stay with me, they wanted to guard against the sport being hurt by players opting out and players leaving and affecting the playoffs. Not coaches, players. I'm doing like an AI thing here. Like not a game, practice. Not coaches, players were going to be the problem here. Isn't it amazing now that we have all these coaches leaving? So yes, there is a calendar problem in college football. However, there is no universe in which 2 jobs in the SEC amongst rivals were going to be held by the same person. A lot of this is counter narrative. And when I say that, oh, it's an ESPN thing, that sounds lazy on its face. And I want to be very clear here what the problem was. Specific to this search, LSU's first phone call was to Nick Saban. They didn't really have a lot of new ideas down on the bayou. They went back to the ex who left them 20 years ago almost? 20 years ago exactly, I think. Next year, 20 years ago, Nick Saban left for the NFL from LSU. And LSU, obviously still thinking it. Didn't take the number out of the phone, right? Didn't quite move on. So once Nick Saban said, no, I'm very much retired. I'm under that blanket on that couch or getting yelled at by my wife. He then assisted and sort of worked as like an advisor with Verge Osbury, the acting athletic director at LSU, on the search. And his suggestion to LSU was Lane Kiffin. This is all fine and good. The problem is, simultaneously, Nick Saban is sitting on the desk of College Game Day talking objectively about this LSU search and talking about how it's unfair to Lane Kiffin that he would not be allowed to coach simultaneously for both programs. That's the glaring conflict of interest. That's bad journalism. And then the fact that everyone around him on that show and across ESPN were like, yeah, he should coach. It's about the players. It's about the players, right? That's what we talked about. It's about the players. The biggest argument here about the players is that Lane Kiffin talked to ESPN's Marty Smith, and this is the only side I've seen, or this is the only quote I've seen from this side. Lane Kiffin claimed, as he's like standing in a grass field at the Oxford airstrip to leave for Baton Rouge, that, the players wanted me to coach. And there's multiple reports coming out that the players have this thing called like a team leadership group, which is pretty common for college football teams. They tried to meet with Kiffin, and he was ducking them the entire time, the last 48 hours that he was in Oxford. And that the players said, hey, if you don't want to, if you're going to LSU, don't coach us, right? So there's conflicting reports, but meanwhile, Saban and a lot of these ESPN personalities were like, it's unfair to the players. I don't really think it's unfair to the players. I think what you have is someone that you're very close to, someone you're affiliated with through agencies, someone that you know very, very close personally, and you're stumping for them to have their cake and eat it too. And logically, when someone said, hey, man, you can't do this job and the other one at the same time, everyone starts talking about how bad the calendar is. Is the calendar bad? Definitely. Is this the reason why Lane Kiffin created so much drama this weekend? No.
In 5 years, will all of this have been worth it for LSU and for Ole Miss?
Ole Miss is going to be harder to measure, but let's go with the school that he chose here in LSU. I think on its merits, it makes a ton of sense about where LSU's at and the overall resources available. And that's not to speak ill of Ole Miss. I just think that Lane Kiffin feels like he wants to be at the very, very top. There's this idea that Lane Kiffin has been hampered by Ole Miss in recruiting, and that's why he relies so much on the portal. But when you talk to people in the industry, what they say is Lane Kiffin is overly reliant on the portal, not because he's at Ole Miss, but because he's Lane Kiffin and that's his style. So the big test for Lane Kiffin at LSU is to become a dominant high school recruiter nationally. Because in Louisiana, it's like Florida or Georgia. You are sort of set to a standard of high school recruiting that you better keep, you better win in February on signing day. And there's tons of high school talent in Mississippi. So it's a little bit of a counter narrative. But he is going to have to change what he does. And the standard at LSU is very simple. You win a national title or you're out. Brian Kelly was the first person since Nick Saban, then Les Miles, then Enda Orgeron to not win a national title. So the expectation is very, very simple and clear here. What I am struck by is less about the value of LSU or the value of Ole Miss. And I've been doing this for about 20 years. And we've run a streak in the last decade of the guy we have to have, the guy that we're going to spend premium top dollar on, not panning out. Do you guys remember when Tom Herman was the hottest commodity in coaching and LSU was chasing him on Thanksgiving and Texas got him and, maybe if USC opens, they'll go after him too. He got fired by FAU last year. Okay. Do you remember when Jimbo Fisher commanded the largest guaranteed contract in college football history? He got fired. Okay. And his otherwise sort of underpublicized former defensive coordinator at Duke, Mike Elko, has come in and been more successful and has them positioned to compete for a national championship at a level that A&M never saw under Jimbo Fisher. So it's interesting to me that it feels like, and this isn't just an LSU problem, this is a college football problem. We kind of ran out of ideas. We got to just poach all these sitting head coaches and nobody is really looking to hey, what's the makeup of the head coach who's going to be successful in the next 10 years? And because we don't know what that is right now, everybody is content to pay these obscene premiums for sitting head coaches at other jobs. We've seen this across college football. This is going to continue until someone can say, there's no Urban Meyer blueprint. There's no Nick Saban blueprint right now on we got to go get a guy from this tree. The closest thing we have is Dan Lanning. It'll be really interesting. Fitz, the one that you didn't mention because it happened late last night as we were actually recording a late episode of College Football Inquirer on Yahoo. Mark Stoops got fired from Kentucky. And it feels like as late as that firing was with all these other jobs being filled with candidates, I think maybe the number one and only quality candidate for that job is Will Stein, the offensive coordinator at Oregon, who is loosely connected to the state of Kentucky. He's a Louisville guy. But what's interesting about that is that Kentucky can't really poach anybody. I mean, if they did, they'd be paying as much as they paid Stoops for probably similar results. So somebody's going to have to experiment on these young coordinators and these up and coming coaches. Maybe it's a job like Kentucky where there's not as much focus. Because right now, all we're doing is we're just looking to grab a sitting head coach. We're looking to grab a sitting head coach. And the problem is you can't repopulate the supply that way. And eventually these guys are going to lose too. So 5 years from now, is Lane Kiffin going to be worth it? If LSU has a national championship, then the answer is unequivocally yes. But Lane Kiffin's never even won a division. He's never won a conference. He's never won anything. And he has admitted several times that he is notoriously self-sabotaging. And I do think that some of the success in Oxford, we're going to find out really soon in the next 2 or 3 years. If the success in Oxford was 100% lanes, 80% lanes, 50% lanes, because they have a really well-functioning NIL apparatus. And a couple of years ago, LSU didn't know what to do with NIL. So they've got to modernize very quickly. So you have to win a national title or you are a bust. And Lane Kiffin, history has taught us, is more often to bust and burn spectacularly in the process. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying he's not. Look, I said it in the post this morning. He is without a doubt a savant. He's one of the best play callers in football, period, full stop. But he is also one of the most unreliable, flaky characters in all of sports. So there's like LSU knows what they're buying. And LSU has a long history of enabling eccentric personalities. So this is going to be fascinating to watch either way.
That was a very kind way of you to say that. Lane
Thank you.
Kiffin
Welcome.
is LSU's manic pixie dream girl. I mean, he
Oh my
is
God,
the idea
Yes,
of him
it's
is so
crazy.
magical, but he
Yes.
leaves a mess everywhere he goes. But
Oh my
you
God,
did a
Lane,
great job covering. He's a manic pixie dream
I'm
girl.
sorry to interrupt you, Caroline. Do you think he's more Zoe Deschanel or like Kirsten Dunst in like Elizabethtown? This is a great question.
Ooh, Kirsten Dunst,
Like-
I think.
No idea.
Kirsten Dunst level? Okay. All right.
Yeah, because I don't think he's so. Because I think that Zoe Deschanel brings a level of quirkiness that's kind of adorable. Lane Kiffin is not that. His, you don't just leave Zoe Deschanel's clothes on the driveway because she's too cute and lovable.
Have y'all
That's
ever had
exactly what they
that
did to
happen
Lane
in a
Kiffin.
breakup? You guys ever had that happen in a breakup where they were just like, it's in the yard? I was going to use a bad word.
Take your stuff
All right.
and go.
Get out. Get out.
You guys have done a great job of covering the Lane Kiffin everything. The hire, the Ole Miss, whatever has come from the blank storm that has come from Lane Kiffin. Did a great job covering that on College Football Inquirer. Outside of Lane Kiffin, because we saw a lot of hires go down yesterday in college football. Which one was the most interesting to you outside of Lane to LSU?
John Summerall to Florida, because what's really fascinating is we see a lot of short-sighted decisions being made by universities that want to win the press conference. And John Summerall is a G5 coach from the state of Louisiana, which is exactly what they hired last time in Billy Napier, and it imploded on them. Now, I don't think John Summerall and Billy Napier are anything alike. I think it's going to be, I never grade these hires. I never attach my name and say like, this is a good hire, this is a bad hire, because there's so much we don't know. There's so much yet to come. However, I do think, I know this, he was very well sought. Like, if the timing with Lane had been different, Ole Miss would have made an offer to John Summerall. He was very well thought of at Auburn. Arkansas wanted him. Kentucky would have died to have him. Okay. What's fascinating to me about this one is that this is Florida saying, hey, we know we're not going to win the press conference with a lot of people. He's a defensive coach at a school that really sort of like is defined by the offensive culture set up by, going all the way back to Steve Spurrier. But long term, this guy makes sense. This guy has built programs. We'll take it in the teeth in terms of optics right now. But this was the best coach available for us. So it's interesting to see a quality hire made at the expense of the PR, because we haven't seen a lot of that lately.
All right, before we get you out of here, college football ranking is going to come tomorrow. After everything we saw and all the chaos and now Lane and everything else that's happened, who's going to get the most screwed by the college football playoff committee tomorrow night?
Right down the street from me, the Commodores of Vanderbilt. Most screwed for sure. That's a great title. I'm sure they're going to love that. We can put out a graphic. Do you guys know who did the Yahoo graphics? The Yahoo graphics team? They did such a great job this weekend where it'd be like Lane Kiffin's on the plane. Like, we need a Yahoo graphic.
Screwed.
Screwed with the Commodores. Yeah. Texas upsetting A&M sort of boxed out the Vanderbilt argument. Does that make sense? Like, so Vandy looked good against Tennessee. Diego Pavia, I think he should go to New York. I definitely think he belongs in the Heisman conversation. But in terms of merit, and then you're looking at resume, it's something that has nothing to do with Vanderbilt. They went 10-2. It's remarkable. First 10 win hit basically in history, like in the modern era of college football. All great, all good. It's going to come down to this. Texas scheduled the best team in the country and lost in week 1. The last thing the committee wants, or anybody, any of the power brokers of college football, and this does go to ESPN because they sort of help arrange these games, we don't want to start punishing people for good out-of-conference scheduling. And so the argument that Texas gets to make to the committee, even though they have a really bad Florida loss, is that our difference between a Vanderbilt or an Oklahoma, which is a team they beat, is that we scheduled stronger. So this is why I think they'll, like, with Oklahoma beating LSU, with Texas upsetting A&M, I think Vanderbilt's going to get boxed out. And then ultimately, guys, the ACC might screw itself. because if Duke wins, I don't think the ACC champion is going to the playoff.
Yeah, that is you called this
Poor Jimmy
Duke
P.
possibility weeks ago on this show. You had it brilliantly. Check out College Football Inquirer. Obviously, follow them on social media at 38 Godfrey is how you get there. Look forward to the graphic coming out with your face, Vandy's logo, just the word "screwed" on it, and we'll see. We'll see how the bosses
thanks
throw
for
that
giving
out.
them
As always,
I appreciate that.
you're welcome. You're welcome. We appreciate you. We'll see you next week, my friend. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Sure.
Oh, the great Stephen Godfrey. All right, we trust him. Do we trust any of these teams in the AFC South? We'll go through a trustometer next. Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. The AFC South standings: the Jags at 8-4, and the Colts at 8-4. The Texans right behind them at 7-5-1, and then Titans at 1-11. Colts at Jags next week. We got all of this after the chaos of the Texans beating the Colts, which brings us to the AFC South trustometer or trustometer, however we want to do it. We're going to go through and figure out how much we actually trust some of these teams in the AFC South. Let's start in first place. I mean, we have in first place the Jacksonville Jaguars. What's your level of trust to the Jags? So actually, we'll go through this differently. Hold on. As you see here, as a result of the Jags win over the Titans, the Texans, the Jags have it's gone up to a 39% portion of this. We'll go through some different portions of the AFC South and figure out what we trust. This is a better way to do it. Head coach. Which head coach in the AFC South do you trust the most?
I lean Shane Steichen. I'm kind of like mentally grappling between D'Amico Ryans in Houston or Shane Steichen. But I look at what Shane Steichen has done in the career renaissance of Daniel Jones. And if we want to give a credit pie to why has Daniel Jones had a career renaissance, Shane Steichen has to have a really large portion of that. We talk about Kyle Shanahan, KOC, all being quarterback whisperers, which I think they deserve those monikers. But I think Shane Steichen also deserves that as well. So what he has done for this offense, how I think he gives Daniel Jones just enough, but not too much, the way that they can lean on the run game. I think Shane Steichen is such a brilliant offensive mind. So I will lean ever so slightly, even the Colts on the skid that they're on right now, ever so slightly Shane Steichen for what he has done with that man right there.
Yeah, and I think he has a real shot at Coach of the Year. But so this is where I'm a little torn.
It depends, though.
It's where, yeah, I know. I mean, there's the Coach of the Year battle this year.
Football left to be played.
Wild. Here's the thing: Daniel Jones' leg. There's a fracture in his leg he's playing through, but through that process, he doesn't look right, right? And so now all of a sudden what I'm seeing is this sort of like the Colts coming back to earth a little bit. Now that isn't really necessarily Steichen's fault, but when I start thinking about trust, one thing I trust is I trust that D'Amico and the Texans can make the most of their defense. I just trust that so much. And so I'm looking at just the style of the coach and what he's been able to get done. There's a lot with the Texans I don't trust, but they sit at 7-5-1 because they figured out exactly how to play through who they are and play through their strengths and weaknesses in a way that really protects them. So because I love their defense so much, which we'll get to in a bit, it's actually D'Amico that I feel like I trust here, but that's D'Amico getting the most out of his best unit versus Steichen getting the most out of his best unit. And I hear you, Caroline. It's really a flip of the coin for me on this because, frankly, I don't know how much is just the injury to Daniel Jones is almost like changing my perspective on the head coach, which isn't necessarily fair. So let's talk quarterbacks for a second. Which of the quarterbacks then in this division do you trust the most?
If I would have said this 2 years ago, I would have thought that I was definitely smoking something. But I think it's Daniel Jones. Like I think, a healthy Daniel Jones, of course, because he, like you said, he hasn't been right. He's injured. But a healthy Daniel Jones and what we've seen from him this year, I think I trust him the most. Now, I think CJ Stroud has the highest ceiling because we've seen it. We saw it in CJ Stroud's rookie season. I just can't trust CJ Stroud because we haven't seen that rookie year version of CJ Stroud, at least consistently enough for me to say, okay, yeah, if these two guys are going toe to toe, I trust CJ Stroud to be able to put the team on his back and win a football game. I don't think I definitely trust Daniel Jones to do that, but I would trust him more. So highest ceiling is definitely CJ Stroud. Trustometer, Daniel Jones.
Yeah, the problem here is that I don't believe in Trevor Lawrence. I know he had a big game. I don't believe consistently that he's going to continue to do that.
He's good for big games every once in a while.
Yeah, like that's like having a big day is not a big deal. Like Trevor Lawrence is the epitome of a dad that shows up sometimes. And when he shows up, it's great. And then the rest of the year, like, where's my dad? That's Trevor Lawrence. Like, I don't know which version is going to show up. Maybe I'm trauma dumping here. But look, CJ Stroud is a shell of himself. My dad was always there, actually. CJ Stroud is a shell of himself. He's no longer the guy that we thought he was going to be. Like, I think we need to start having two separate conversations. Like, what happened his rookie year and how can they replicate it? You're right. He's got greatness in him, but the Texans have done nothing to bring that out. So I don't trust that that's going to suddenly fix itself. If we were talking about the next 3 years, do I trust more? It's certainly CJ Stroud. But in the thick of where we are right now, I don't trust everything around him to become calm enough to actually get the best of him. So I don't trust him. That leads me to Daniel Jones by default. And maybe I just trust Daniel Jones handing off to Jonathan Taylor. Maybe that's the only way I trust him. I don't know. But I think in this conversation, there aren't a lot of great options. What about the defense? Which defense do you trust the most and why is it the Texans?
Texans. It's the Texans. It's unequivocally the Texans. It is the Texans, and they are in a different stratosphere, a different zip code than any other defense in the AFC South. I mean, the Texans, they sacked Josh Allen 8 times the other week. They have in the last 3 weeks, they haven't given up more than 19 points, and that was to the Josh Allen and the Bills. I mean, the Texans defense, I think we can have a conversation about it being the best in the NFL. Now, the Denver Broncos might want a word, but they are in that conversation of the best defenses in the NFL. I think Will Anderson, if there was a man named Myles Garrett, ever heard of him, that didn't exist, I think that we'd be talking far more about Will Anderson in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. And then you add Danielle Hunter into the mix, and that is a disgusting, in the best possible way, pass rush. And then you have one of the best lockdown corners in the National Football League in Derek Stingley Jr. in the back end. It's impossible to score on this Houston Texans defense. I have so much trust in this defense. It is the Texans. Hands down, it's the Texans. Nobody even comes close. And we're talking about a Colts defense that traded the farm for Sauce Gardner. And now Sauce Gardner is hurt.
Yeah, I mean, the Colts defense on paper, if we were doing the video game version of it, should be better than it is. And it just hasn't necessarily come together. And this injury, by the way, some people were worried at first it was an Achilles. He's made it pretty clear that it feels like a calf injury, but that's still what we see this all the time. How's that going to play in? The Colts started so hot, And whether it's because of injuries or whether it's because things have just sort of fallen off a little bit, sometimes it's, everybody gets a little bit of film on you. They figure out how to attack you better. It just feels like the Colts are in a lot of close games right now, and they're not showing the same identity. Like, as much as I sit here and I question teams like the Broncos and say, well, are they just lucky and not actually good because they keep winning close games? The Colts are in these close games, and they're not finding a way to win them. So that's problematic in this process. I believe in the Texans defense so much because there isn't a weak layer of it. That if you get through the defensive line, then you got to get through the next group in that. Those linebackers can absolutely fly. The guys in the back can cover all over the place. They swarm. They mix their coverages up all the time. It gets really tough to face them. They are truly a multiple defense. We talked about that a few years ago. Like, multiple was one of those catchphrases for defenses that could get in and out of looks all the time. That's exactly who the Texans are. It's why their defense is so scary. So that being said, we've gone through these teams. Which team do you trust to go on the deepest run to get to a Super Bowl?
Let me just say, I have trust issues with every team in the AFC. So this is not a glowing endorsement, but I think it's the Colts. I think, and maybe I'm not giving the Texans defense nearly enough credit. But if Jonathan Taylor is cooking, and Jonathan Taylor has had a quiet last couple of weeks, this Colts team as a whole has had, a fall from grace, so to speak. So if that continues, if Daniel Jones can't get healthy, if they can't find a way for Jonathan Taylor to just absolutely take a game over, then that gives me concern. It also gives me pause that the Colts have the toughest schedule upcoming of either of these three teams. They get the Jags, which is a huge game in the divisional standings. And then outside of the division, they get the Seahawks and the 49ers, where the Houston Texans get the Cardinals, the Raiders, and the Chiefs. And the way the Chiefs are playing right now, I'm not overly concerned about the Chiefs. But the Texans can beat the Cardinals and the Raiders. I mean, even if they don't beat the Chargers at the end of the season, I still think that they can beat the Colts at the end of the year. They just did. I mean, why not? And then Jacksonville, they get the Jets. They get the Broncos, but still, of those three upcoming schedules, the Colts have the toughest one. But I still know that Colts team that we saw at the beginning of the season is in there somewhere. If injuries don't hinder it too much, I think it's the Colts.
Problem is, to your point, every game remaining on the Colts schedule is against a team that very likely could make the playoffs. Because the Jags, the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Jags, and the Texans are all playoff caliber football teams. They don't get any rest. They've got less of Daniel Jones than they need with the leg injury that he's trying to battle through. And I love that he's trying to battle through it. That's part of what makes him great. But part of the reason I fell in love with this offense coming into the season was I loved Steichen's ability to work with mobile quarterbacks that have a lot of size, that aren't afraid to move around and get guys open and then throw to their tight ends and, sort of use the middle portion of an offense. We can't do any of that when you're running around on a fracture in your fibula, right? Like, it's wild what Daniel Jones is trying to play through. So while it is the Colts, because we've seen the best of what we've seen from all three of these teams, nobody's better than the Colts. Can we get the best of what we've seen? I don't trust, I'll say it loudly, I do not trust the Texans offensively. I trust their defense tremendously, but if they get into any sort of a spot where they have to go score for score with somebody, if they have to actually get CJ Stroud rolling out and doing a bunch consistently, I don't think he can do that. So the way this offensive line is played this year, I don't trust the Texans. I don't trust Trevor Lawrence. So even though the Colts feel broken right now, man, it feels like in some ways I trust their ability to fix those problems before the playoffs more than I trust the ability for the offensive line to suddenly play the way they need to play for CJ Stroud to be great, or for Trevor Lawrence, his receivers, that entire offense to suddenly figure out how to get that rhythm that they've missed so much of the year. It feels like that's asking for huge fixes to things we haven't really seen consistently. All I'm asking the Colts to do is get back to what they did throughout the course of this season that made them really good. So I think I feel better about the Colts today, but man, I don't know. And by the way, let's all remember, just Caroline, that the AFC South was supposed to suck. So the next time you spend all summer lamenting how good or bad a division is, let's remind everybody that the AFC North is trash and the AFC South actually has three teams that look like they're headed to the playoffs. Who'd have thought?
100%. We were even saying that a few weeks ago, that the AFC South was done. It was signed. It was sealed. It was delivered. It was the Colts, winning that division all tied up with a pretty ribbon. Now, here we are with plenty of football left to be played, and this division is wide open. But Fitz, we named teams that we trust to get to a Super Bowl, coaches we trust, quarterbacks we trust. Never in our conversation did we talk about the Jags. Did we talk about Trevor Lawrence? Did we talk about Liam Cohen? Did we talk about our trust level for the Jags? So I want to put that out there, that I know the Jags now lead the division, but I can't trust the Jags because I don't know what they do really well. I know the Colts can run the ball really well. I know that Daniel Jones can do just enough to will his team to victory. I know the Texans can play stifling defense. They can beat anybody in the NFL with that defense. What do the Jags do well?
Their defense is opportunistic. They've done a nice job of forcing turnovers, and some of it's just who they're going to play. They still have the Jets and the Titans left on their schedule. So at 8-4 right now, the Jags are going to get to 10 wins. No matter what they do well or don't do well, the Jags are going to get to 10 wins. And that's
true.
Like that's just when we just start doing the math of it, you're right. We're not giving the Jags enough love and respect here. Jags fans, who cares? Your team's going to the playoffs. Like, you can prove us wrong in the playoffs. You have your opportunity to see who can go on the deeper run there. All right, we've got football tonight. It's Monday. So for all the action we saw on Thursday and all the action we saw on Sunday, it all comes down to this: a Monday night football matchup for the ages? Okay, fine. It may not be for the ages, but Monday Night Football tonight, we'll preview it next. Welcome back to Yahoo Sports Daily. With their Sunday Night Football win, the Broncos have taken over first place in the AFC. For now, the Patriots will be able to reclaim that spot if they take down the juggernaut Giants tonight on Monday Night Football. That's our matchup. We get Giants taking on New England on Monday night, and obviously a ton on the line for this one, Caroline, for the Patriots, a team that has shocked many by being in this conversation for the 1 seed. And then the Giants, who are just out here. Jackson Dart is going to come back. Let's see if Jackson Dart can protect himself. Let's see if Jackson Dart can continue to give Giants fans tremendous hope. It feels like that's the spark plug that Giants fans are watching tonight for.
And that is the thing. That is the only thing, in my opinion, that the Giants fans have had to look forward to really all season long. Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterboot, of course, the people's princess. But outside of Jackson Dart, tonight and this entire season, what do we got here with the Giants? You don't have a head coach. You don't have a defensive coordinator. You have an offensive coordinator that's an inexperienced play caller going up against Josh McDaniels, who might be the best offensive play caller in the National Football League, who's not a head coach. Look, I know primetime games are always weird. They're always funky. This time of year, anything can happen on any given Sunday or Monday. But what percentage chance are we really giving the Giants to win this game?
Very, very, very low. But also, I mean, if I'm being honest, that's what I said when the Giants were taking on the Eagles the last time they got a win. You never know. And this is where.
Yeah,
fans
but
will
this is a different Giants team. No.
Nah, I mean, I think so. And this is a different Patriots team too. Like I think
Yeah.
once you're the Giants and you did this to the Eagles, now all of a sudden what you just did is you made Vrabel's job really easy to keep your team focused. All you got to do is go back, show them what happened to Philadelphia just a month and a half ago, and say, hey, you don't want to be this, right? Like it's easy to keep everybody locked in, and the Patriots are playing for so much. The opportunity to go through Foxborough is huge in this year's AFC. I cannot stress that enough, especially if we are talking about some of these teams like the Jags and possibly the Texans, the Colts that play indoors, having to find their way into Foxborough in the playoffs. Like that's why all of these games I think matter so much. I would view the Patriots wildly different going into the playoffs if I know they have home field advantage throughout.
I will say this because, well, first of all, anytime I get to watch Jackson Dart and Drake May, for that matter, I'm intrigued. Color me interested because I think these are two of the most exciting young quarterbacks in the NFL. One thing that we kind of tabbed when I was doing Sports Talk Radio in Nashville was what we called the Vrabel special. That Vrabel was good for winning games that they had no business winning and then losing games that they had no business losing. Just go back and look at a couple of game sample size from Mike Vrabel from the Titans. They would go out and beat the Buffalo Bills on Monday Night Football and then lose to a crummy, crappy Jets team. It was inexplicable. Look, maybe the Vrabel special doesn't exist when you have a young quarterback like Drake May and a team like the Patriots that are playing the way that they're playing. But they're getting banged up. They had some injuries on the offensive line. They've now won 8 straight, 9 straight. The Patriots are on an absolute heater. It would be so Vrabel special-esque to be on the 9-game winning streak that the Patriots are on, and then turn around and lose to a Giants team with a young quarterback that's coming back from concussion protocol and no defensive coordinator and no head coach. That's so Vrabel special. That's the path for the Giants, is the Vrabel special is Vrabel specialing.
I mean, you're also talking about the possibility of a trap game. I know it's Monday Night Football, but after this, they get a bye, and then they take on the Bills in the game that we've all got our eyes on. Trap game on Monday Night Football. I'm trying to walk.
I'm talking myself into this being a juicy game.
Somehow, some way, we are going to make this thing compelling because I refuse to call any football game juicy. Come back tomorrow. We'll be right here at 9 a.m. to hang out with you. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. Thanks so much for watching Yahoo Sports Daily. We'll see you tomorrow morning.